Thor Ramsey is a nationally known stand-up comedian and one of the most recognized names in Christian comedy. Since 1987, Thor has performed in comedy clubs and churches across the country. And he wrote and produced his own comedy series for one season, Comedy at Large with Thor Ramsey. And he has also produced and directed 5 stand-up comedy specials. But many of you may know Thor as the host of Bananas, which ran for 3 seasons. And Thor was featured in 3 of the best-selling Christian comedy DVDs of all time, Thou Shalt Laugh, from the same producer as the Blue Collar Comedy Tour. Well, Thor Ramsey wrote Church People, the movie, in which he stars as Guy, the megachurch youth pastor, which I personally found to be one of the funniest faith-based comedy movies ever made thus far. So ladies and gentlemen, let's welcome comedian, actor, and writer Thor Ramsey to the show. Welcome, Thor.
Hey, good to be here. Thanks for having me.
Hey, man, right off the bat, I've got to say, I absolutely fell in love with Church People. I loved all the characters, and what a stellar job you did.
Well, thanks, man. I really appreciate that. I hope we're hoping to become a cult classic because our theatrical release was during the beginning of COVID. So we lost a bunch of theaters, and but the DVD releases, it released February 8th. So we're hoping it'll pick up some steam.
Well, we're going to be part of helping you and the rest of the cast and crew to get the word out about Church People because, again, I absolutely love the film, but I want to kind of go back in history a bit. How did you get into comedy and the entertainment business?
Well, the story I tell, so this is a true story, actually. No, not a story I just make up, but when I was a junior in high school, I was dating a girl, and she came to me one day at school and said, "I dreamt you were on the Tonight Show last night." And she goes, "You had a good set," which I thought was funny, and because even at that stage, I wanted to be a comedian. And but I was from Nebraska, and the only comedy. This was like 1980. What year was this? Anyway, I don't want to give that away. But the only comedy club I'd ever heard of was the Comedy Store in Los Angeles on Sunset, Boulevard. And so I just didn't have the courage to come out to California alone. So I did the normal thing, went to college, got a job, and I just found myself hating my life. And I thought to myself, well, if you're not going to follow your own dreams, you might as well follow somebody else's. So I found my way to a local comedy club because the comedy boom was happening at that time. So comedy clubs were popping up all over the country. So I found a place that had a comedy contest, entered it. I won the first round, and then I just started emceeing there weekly. And that led, within a year, I was working 42 weeks a year on the road, traveling as a comic.
Wow.
That's pretty much it. That was 1987 when I began stand-up in the secular market. I was not working in the Christian market at that time. This was, Funny Bones and Improvs and Chuckle Huts all over the, country.
Well, how did you make the switch from, what would you call it, mainstream comedy to faith-based comedy? How did you make that turn?
Yeah, so I got married. That was pretty much it. We've been married now for I don't know how many, 20. I suppose I should find that out, but we've been married for 20 some years. I don't know. I think we're approaching 25 years or 30 years, right in there. So we've been married a good long time. But when I first got married, I was like, I need help. I'm not going to make it in this marriage. And so I had some Christian experience my freshman year of college through Campus Crusade for Christ. And it's a long story, but basically my marriage is what brought me back to Christ, to a relationship with Christ. And then we started going to church in Chicago. We were in Chicago at the time. So we started going to church at the Moody Bible Church there in Chicago. Pastor Erwin, it's either Lutzer or Lutzer. I'm not sure how to pronounce his last name. God forgive me. May he forgive me, but he's a great orator, great preacher. And so we sat under his ministry for a while before about a year later, we moved out to California. And then I started meeting people who were, I didn't even know Christian comedy existed, to be honest. I mean, I didn't know it was an option. Well, I take that back, because there was Mike Warnke, but it wasn't like there was I didn't know others could do that, because Mike Warnke played to, and he would draw like 2,500 people back in the day. This is even, pre Mark Lowry, pre Shonda Pierce, who are the only comedians who had a following, so to speak.
Yeah.
So I didn't know, options. And so the one option I came across was Chuck Colson's Prison Fellowship was doing a thing called Starting Line, where they bring in all types of different artists, singers, professional athletes, comedians, and they'd bring about 5 of us into a yard, which is, where all the prisoners congregate, and we'd set up a sound system and perform a variety show, basically, and then share the gospel and get them signed up for a Bible study that local volunteers would then come in and start leading. And so that was my first foray into Christian events, was prisons. So I went from comedy clubs to prisons to church events, and that's how God prepares you for doing youth group.
Yeah, absolutely. And I know that many people watching recognize you from Bananas. How did that whole concept happen?
Yeah, so we got organized, I don't know how many years ago, but we began this thing called the Christian Comedy Association. And this was, I think, our first or second conference. And a producer from Ohio, his name, it's been so many years ago now, but a producer from Ohio showed up, and they had basically they had a television studio, and they wanted to produce a comedy show. So they had the concept for basically doing kind of a Christian version of Evening at the Improv, and came out to the conference, and we did showcases, for the conference every year. And so they watched the showcase and talked to me afterwards about hosting it. And so that's basically how that ball got rolling. I became the host of Bananas. And the mistake I made was they wanted to put my name in the title. They wanted to call it Bananas with Thor Ramsey. But we went back and forth over the title of the series, because I wanted them to call it Pure Comedy. But they were sold on this little tagline, Bananas, appealing comedy for the whole family. But I was so embarrassed, but I thought Bananas was a corny title. I thought it was just completely corny, which it was. And that's the whole purpose of clean comedy. It is corny. So you have to embrace that. If you're a clean comedian, you got to embrace being corny. You're not going to be cool. So I was younger. So when you're young, you want to be cool. So I should have just embraced the corniness and, embrace the soccer moms who want this kind of comedy and want that for their family. Because now that, you're married and you have kids, you understand the mentality now. But, when you're younger, you want to be cool. So I actually told them, don't put my name in the title. Which,
Yeah.
you look back on your career and you go, that was a really stupid thing to do. Because now all those DVDs now would all be, instead of just saying Bananas, they would all say Bananas with Thor Ramsey. And, but anyway, so you make the decisions you make sometimes. But that's how Bananas got rolling. We actually shot 4 seasons, but I think only 3 were broadcast.
Yeah.
The economy hit I think it was one of those, I can't remember what year it was now, so don't ask me for timelines, but the economy took a dive, and so they basically stopped production. But I know that they wanted to shoot 5 seasons because then you can syndicate it.
Yeah.
But they ended up selling it to Sony Television, I think, the series. But that's the last I heard of it.
Well, let me ask you this: when it comes to Christian comedy, how difficult is it to write stand-up being a Christian comedian compared to writing being a mainstream comedian where, anything goes? How do you find that fine line not to, let's say, tick off the church?
Yeah, well, that generally comes because comedy's about your point of view in life. And so if you're a Christian, you'll have a Christian point of view, hopefully. is the whole idea. We can talk about Christian artists and their point of view and how biblically informed that is or not. And I think that's the issue in the Christian arts. Arts tend to liberalize, and so I think the challenge for Christian artists is, maintaining a sincerely biblical worldview.
Yeah.
So I don't think it's any more. There's an old saying. I'm not sure who it's attributed to. I think it's attributed to Ed Wynn on his deathbed. Ed Wynn, the comedic actor that some of your audience might be familiar with, but he's I don't know, he played the character in Mary Poppins. I think he was related to Mary Poppins somehow in the scene where they're laughing and they float. Ed Wynn was the character in that scene that she goes to visit. I can't remember if it was her uncle or cousin or whatever it was, but he was a great character actor. But on his deathbed, somebody supposedly asked him, how you doing? And now the quote's different than this, but the quote came to be, dying is easy, comedy is hard. And that's pretty much the whole idea. Comedy, regardless, is hard. I remember Jerry Seinfeld saying one time, and I only had one conversation with Jerry Seinfeld in my life, and it was very brief, so I don't know if this is from that conversation or something I read, but Seinfeld one time said that it takes, for every 10 jokes you write, only one works. So that's kind of you're really shooting percentages. You're just writing stuff and you're waiting to see what hits. So, and you can only find what hits by trying it out in front of a crowd. And I think that becomes the most challenging part. It's because it's the immediate acceptance or rejection. And when you're younger, that rejection is hard to take. So you have to develop a thicker skin. And I wish I had the mentality I have now and I could go back as a young comedian, because it would be much easier, because, as you get older, you're just not as concerned about, the bandwagon of what everyone's thinking and how everyone, it's the cool factor and the rejection factor. You're just able to take the rejection as you get older, I think, in a much more palatable way. But when you're younger, the rejection is hard to take. So you tend to not try out as much material. So that's the whole thing. You keep doing the stuff that works. And then you just got to get to that place where you just keep trying out material. And, but either way, whether you're writing for a mainstream audience, or, I don't use mainstream. I do there is secular comedy, and then Christian comedy is a genre. Yeah. Now, Christian comedy is not always overtly Christian in the sense that you can talk about, like, 90% of your acts can be about just everyday stuff, your marriage, your family. I noticed this, observational stuff, or whatever it happens to be. And then you might have 5 or 10% that's specific to church life or something like that. But I think the percentages are even smaller a lot of times on that. So generally, Christian comedy is pretty mainstream. Yeah. It's just that it doesn't, at least it shouldn't, delve into vulgarity.
Yeah. Well, I've talked to Jeff Allen, I've talked to Michael Jr., and they're both out there in the mainstream. And there's a way to get the message across without being preachy within the comedy.
Yeah. So I think, but Christian comedy now, this has taken me years to get here, but it is a genre. Like Christian film is a genre of film. And every genre, the audience comes with expectations. So the Christian artist should be Christian in their worldview, whether they're a singer or a comedian or whoever they happen to be. And I think that's what becomes defining. But Christian comedy is one of those things, though. Everyone feels they have a sense of humor, and everyone probably does. But again, everyone's sense of humor is personal to them. So I tend not to be like, I've never been a slapstick person. I've never found slapstick funny, but I found witty people funny. I like witty dialogue in movies, not necessarily, physical stuff.
Yeah.
So even though, you know, I liked Dick Van Dyke as a kid, I still think the Dick Van Dyke Show is one of the best sitcoms ever
Oh
created.
yeah, I
And
agree.
Dick Van Dyke was a physical comedian, but I thought the show itself was just a brilliant show. But I like witty dialogue. You know, like one of my main influences growing up as a teenager was Neil Simon plays. Because Neil
Really?
Simon, yeah, Neil Simon, if you know, his plays are there's a wittiness to his dialogue, snappy. They're snappy back and forth, and so I really liked that about Neil Simon. Uh, you know, I don't know how I feel about. I haven't read him in years, or you know, and it's not that I'm a huge fan of all his movies or anything, but I used to read his plays, and it was the dialogue in his plays that I ended up really liking. But all that to say, yeah, you can still offend the Christian audience, sometimes unintentionally. Stuff that you think is completely innocent to you is offensive to someone else, and so there's that fine line. And I've just learned to, you know, just when anyone complains, and when I was younger, I wouldn't drop it, you know, because I'd have my, you know, my conviction. And but as I'm older now, it's like if anyone complains about anything, I just drop it, you know, because
Yeah.
I'm not here. I'm not a socially. I'm not a. Well, my stand up is not political or social in terms of doing social commentary for the most part. I do a podcast show that's political in nature, but that's the intent. You
Yeah.
know, and political material is topical and it has a short lifespan. So you're trying to build a stand-up show that you can do. You know, I've got some jokes I've been doing since year one of comedy. So I've got some bits that are over 30 years old, probably.
Yeah, but if they work, they work.
That's exactly it. They you know, I think good comedy is like a good suit, a classic cut. It's always going to be in style.
Oh
Don't
yeah.
go with the trendy cut, thin tie from the 80s. You can't wear those anymore. But if you wore the classic tie, you could still wear it today.
Well,
So
yeah.
go with the
Just be
classic and
Rodney
not the trendy.
Dangerfield, and
There
just
you go.
stick with what you know.
That's
But
it.
I want to talk to you about church people. And again, I love the film. Had a great conversation with director Christopher Sean Shaw. But I want to ask you, Thor, how long did it take you from writing the first draft to getting church people into film production?
Um, well, again, at least 5 to 10 years. I
Really?
don't know if it's quite a decade, but Christopher's better at the timeline. If he was here, he could help me with the timeline on this. But I could look on my laptop because I've got
Well,
all the.
Christopher
I've
told
got
me
all the.
about 5.5 years.
Okay, so there you go. So I said 5 to 10, so about 5 years. But I started. I probably did not probably. I did over 30 drafts of that script. So there's literally 3 different movies in there, probably. From the first draft to what we finally ended up with, and you know the drafts before that, which were now the the one thing that was pretty much constant all throughout. Once I hinged on the idea, was the over the top pastor who wants to crucify the youth pastor on Good Friday. That was a staple throughout all those scripts because that was the big idea. You know, because it started with just kind of a slice of life kind of comedy. I wanted it to be more realistic based, but you know, just still have a comedic edge to it. And I was sending versions of the script to. He's still over there at Sony Faith. I don't think they're called Sony Faith anymore. They're called something else now. Anyway, whatever they're called, it's at Sony Pictures in their Faith division. Josh Nadler, but Josh was an executive over there, and he actually gave me notes on 5 versions of the script. But Josh is the one who's, after the first draft, he read it and says, "What you need right now to bring all your characters together is a big idea." And he says that's what you need, something to bring everyone together. So I'm like, oh, okay, well, I'll be on the lookout for a big idea. I don't know what that would be, but here's how it came about. I had a good friend of mine, was probably my best friend at the time, was a church planter, and he called me up and he said, "You're not going to believe what this gigantic megachurch that is nationally known and we're all familiar with is doing on Good Friday? I'm like, well, I'm all ears now. What are they doing? He goes, they're crucifying someone on Good Friday. I'm like, there's no way. He goes, no, I'm looking at their social media now. They're having an actual crucifixion. So I searched their social media, and it turns out that they were only doing a passion play, but they were going to try to make it so realistic that they had all these warnings about if you're squeamish or you faint at the sight of blood. And so it seemed like they were going to crucify someone when they weren't. But what hit me is that so many pastors, probably with all the best of intentions in evangelicalism, had done so many crazy things to draw people to church that for a second, my friend and I actually believed that an American evangelical church would crucify someone on Good Friday to draw people to church. And I realized I got my big idea. And right then I was like, that's it. That's the idea. I just have to figure out a reason, you know. So that's really what that became the driving force of every version of the script that was ever written.
Well, it's funny because when I saw the movie trailer first and saw that they, this wild pastor wanting to literally crucify someone on Good Friday, I was sitting there actually thinking, Thor, you know what? I would not be surprised if a church absolutely tried to pull that off.
Well, everything else we put in the movie, churches did.
Oh, I know.
We didn't make it like the BMX bikes jumping over the pastor, the Superman outfit, whatever else we could put. Now we had other stuff, but didn't make the cut. But the edit. But we didn't really make any of that up. We were just reporting at that point, So and it's problematic when the church doesn't recognize it's entered a realm of parody. It's satirizing itself, which is a point of the movie. It diminishes the gospel then.
Yeah, of course. Because see, when I watched the film, and the thing that the thing that I was laughing about was that everything in the movie is actually happening right now. and
Unfortunately.
Yeah. So there was two sides to this movie to church people when I was watching it. One, as Christians, we need to laugh at ourselves, which is very important to do because everything in that movie is really going on in the church today, and especially the modern megachurches. It's going on. Two, I loved your character Guy because one of the most poignant parts of that movie is when you looked at the pastor and you said, "Isn't the gospel enough?"
Right.
And I think many churches today have lost that focus, have lost that message. So they think they need to, brand the church and do all these things to get people in when Jesus and even the Apostle Paul built the church just on the gospel alone.
Yeah, it's almost like churches feel like they have to dress up the gospel. We got to help God out. And it's not that we don't want to do wise things. It's not that we can't do pragmatic things, but I think there comes a point where the church has to realize that some of the things that she does to be attractional are actually doing the opposite of what they want it to do. I mean, they might attract people, but they're not attracting people to Christ. So what they're attracting, it's that old saying, what you capture people with is what you keep them with. So if you capture them with a big show, you have to keep doing a big show every week, and pretty soon you hit a glass ceiling. And that was, the point of that of Pastor Skip in the movie. So he'd hit his glass ceiling. So that's why he was finally over the top.
Well, the thing about first of all, every character in Church People was absolutely perfect. Every actor and actress was absolutely perfect for their role, which I loved. I mean, I thought the casting was perfect.
Great.
The storylines were fantastic. Even when I watched the movie, there were storylines that popped up within the movie that surprised me. I didn't see them coming. So I love that because there was always something around the corner that you didn't know was going to happen. So you were constantly being interested from the beginning to the end. But the thing about this movie is that the church really just kind of, and I told Christopher this, the church needs to wake up and look at themselves, because one of the things I noticed, and you literally nailed it, just like the modern church is doing today, they're bringing people in to get them saved, but then it ends there.
Right.
The discipleship is completely lacking. It's like, great, you're saved, but as they're walking out the door, they're not equipping them with a shield and a sword. And that's where the failure is happening in today's modern church. But your film nailed the megachurch, and in a funny way. But I'm literally, Thor, I'm a huge fan.
It was. I feel like if people watch, it's not a mean-spirited movie.
No,
because we love the church, we love Jesus, we love the church. I'm not even against megachurches per se. I'm not against a church being large. I think some large churches do it really well, but it's keeping the focus, keeping the main things, as it said, and not getting away from that. And I think that's the biggest thing. A lot of times, I know that in some of the pre-screening, because we had some celebrity evangelicals involved. Stephen Baldwin, celebrity evangelical, so he was able to screen it to other celebrity megachurch pastors, and it wasn't received completely well. They felt it was making fun of them.
Well, yeah, it is.
So I'm going, I think it's one of those things, like, if your church is too close to doing what's in the movie, it's going to sting a little bit. So I feel like it's like, can the church be rebuked by a movie, and are they willing to I don't know that
no,
the box office numbers.
I was hoping, in reality, after I watched the film, I really hope in a way that happens, because the ending of the movie is one of the best endings I have ever seen in a faith-based movie, because
that's great.
It was real. But I want to back up a bit, because two characters in the movie really stand out. One is Guy. Your character was spot on from beginning to end. Guy played literally. I'm
glad you say so.
Seriously, because I was
not happy with him.
Guy loved. I could tell. Guy loves the gospel. He loves the message of the gospel. He wants the message to be pure. When the opening scenes of Guy going on his book tour, and the way that it went from the beginning towards the end, he knew then and there the message got lost.
Right.
And it was in a way mirroring what the pastor was doing, but the character Guy didn't like what was going on. The other character that I thought nailed it was Stephen Baldwin when he played Chad. Because it's like I told Christopher, every church has a Chad.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, and what I would love to see from church people is a spinoff with you and Stephen Baldwin with the same characters, because I just think it's the new comedic duo of Touched by an Angel.
Never thought about it. Well, there's a pitch. I can pitch the comedic version of Touched by an Angel. See if we can sell that.
Now, I understand that Stephen literally created this character from his mind. What did you think of his character when he brought it forth for the movie?
Well, so when we were writing it, he said, just give me a small role. So we didn't have a character he could play in the script. So I created a character at that time. I was still writing, just doing the drafts by myself, but I created a character that was a greeter, and he really was the bumper. As every scene ended, his character would come in, and initially Chad was just a comedic character. He was just a funny greeter, and doing all these, he was an over-enthusiastic greeter was the idea, and that's where the humor came from. And then in another draft of the script, then his character kind of morphed into kind of a more mysterious character. Mm-hmm. And so I don't want to give too much away, but and so then we played on that. because there's a little bit of that stereotype in terms of, you know, the touched by an angel character. So we wanted to, you know, we wanted to give people a little surprise about that too. So I don't want to give that away, but we do, you know, so that's where that, you know, that's a lot of people like that's their favorite part of the movie is the reveal about, you know, Steven's character. But the tone of the character and what he wanted to accomplish with that character, he really did. He just communicated to the writers what he wanted to Wes Halula and myself, really what he wanted that character to become. And Bob Sands, I think, because in Bob's draft of the script, that's when Steven's character became more mysterious. And then Wes and I did our final rewrite together, spending about a month together, and ended up tweaking it some more. But again, that all came from Steven's communication.
Well, did you play a part in choosing the cast?
Yeah. Yeah.
So you knew exactly what type of character you were looking for each one, because again, I thought the casting was perfect.
You have something in mind, but you know, I've always been, it's not my only movie, but I'm of the mind that the actor can bring something that is not on the page. So it's got to be on the page. The funny's got to be on the page, but sometimes you see an actor and you're like, yes. I mean, you know, because you have an idea of what you want, but then the actor doesn't necessarily look like what would you imagine, but they bring something man, I'm blanking out here.
Well, you know, even when I saw Billy Baldwin and China Phillips.
Joey Fatone.
Oh yeah. Oh wow, what a part!
Yeah, you know, I think we were only his second or third movie because you know his background is as a singer.
Yeah.
But he's got a great comedic sensibility, and his character Tony was my favorite character in the script. I thought he was the funniest character on the page, and I really felt like he nailed it in just his delivery and what he brought to the performance himself. So I ended up really liking his character, and then China Phillips and
Billy Baldwin
that's their scene together is my favorite scene in the movie.
Really?
Yeah, that's my favorite scene in the movie. Just that help their parents of the main teenage character, and so I just thought they nailed that.
Yeah, they did, and I love Blaze. I love the character Blaze. Every youth group has a Blaze.
Every youth group has a Blaze. Yeah, and actually, I borrowed the name Blaze from a kid who was. Now the kid was not like Blaze, but I loved the name. He was actually his mom actually named him after Blaise Pascal, you know, or however you pronounce Pascal's last name, but the Christian philosopher. So she named him after him. But like, what a great name for. So I stole that name from that kid who was actually in a youth group at the time, and just because it fit that character.
Yeah. Now let me ask you this, because when I'm watching the beginning of the movie and your character Guy is on his book tour, and I also noticed too when you addressed the youth group at the church, I was sitting there watching, and I'm thinking, Thor Ramsey can act. And then when you were trying to bring forth the message of the gospel, I was sitting there thinking, is he acting or is he just being real? Because your performance was so stellar in this movie, it was difficult for me to separate your character, but also you inside that character. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Well, I'm not a character actor, so so you're really, in one sense, you're being yourself as much as you can be. Now, I will say this, because it was the first. I know I've done a ton of short films, but this is the first feature length film, and acting is a lot harder than people realize. Because I was always of the impression on this, you can either act or you can't. Like no one can teach you how to act. I'm still of that mindset. You either have an instinct for acting or you don't. But with those instincts come techniques. It's kind of like the raw athlete, the person who's just a naturally gifted athlete. They still need to learn techniques if they want to excel at whatever particular sport they're going to play. And I found that was my misconception of acting. It's not just that you can act or you can't, but boy, if you don't learn the techniques and understand what goes into creating a character, because I would have done my character completely differently now if we were able to film it again. Because I thought my character was too dour throughout the whole thing. I thought he was too angry, and I would have played him more frustrated, like, what? Why is everyone crazy? I would have played him more like that rather than like,
No,
let's get back to the gospel.
I thought it worked very well. Now, what kind of help did you receive from Michael Monks when it came to acting?
Well, Michael Monks. So Michael Monks was in the because we did a proof of concept trailer before the film was funded. So we gathered a bunch of people, called in a bunch of favors, took a day, filmed a bunch of scenes, and made a trailer for a movie that didn't exist yet. Which is really how the movie got made. We made that trailer, and then Stephen Baldwin saw it, and they got the ball rolling. But so Michael Monks played Pastor Skip in that original trailer, and then Stephen's, as we were having meetings with Stephen, trying to get this thing funded, one of the things he said was, and even as we got it funded, he said, let's try to stick to what made that trailer work. So like if we can cast any of those actors, let's try. So that's how Michael Monks got the role. And then come to find out, Michael Monks is also an acting coach. So he teaches acting in Los Angeles. And so having him on set was vital for me, especially during so there was one scene where I had to cry. And boy, you really hate as an actor when they cut around your crying. It's like, but come on now. It's like, get the whole cry in there. This is hard. But crying is, at least for me, it may be different for other actors, but it's hard work. And I would have not been able to do that scene without Michael Monks coaching. He basically said, find someone in your life that represents this character for you. And just that mental trick of finding someone that represented that situation in my personal life was how you draw on the emotional,
Yeah.
You draw on that emotional background to bring it to the scene. But I would have, without that mental trick, I don't know how I would have pulled that scene off. But that came from his coaching. So in that sense, he was vital. But I did really gain a new respect for actors. Well, to be honest, I didn't have great respect for actors. I'm just like, I had respect for writers, because that's where all the ideas come from. And I feel like writers don't get their due. It's like the actors would have nothing to do without the writers. The writers are the creative backbone of all entertainment industries, and that's the only thing stand-ups do is they happen to write their own material. So, and that's really why I started stand-up, because I still wanted to be a screenwriter when I began stand-up, but it was the easiest rung into show business. But you can still write, you can direct yourself, you act when you're doing stand-up. So you do all the elements that you do in a movie, except, it's on the cheap. And so, but acting is much more difficult than I realized, and had a lot more technique involved in it. So I have a great respect for what actors do now.
Well, how did you meet director Christopher Sean Shaw?
So, well, once I wrote the screenplay, it was called Youth Group at the time, got changed to Church People later. But when I wrote the screenplay for Church People, I just wanted to get it made. I was just like, give me $25,000 or $50,000 and a group of people, and we'll get this made. So at the time I was like, well, let me just start networking. I live out in California. This is the home of filmmaking. There should be a bunch of, faith-based people out here, and let's gather together and make this film. So I just started networking and met Christopher. I guess I was already Facebook friends with him. But I did that thing when I was new to Facebook, however many years ago it was. And so I began my personal page was my fan page. I didn't know you could have your own, I didn't know there were distinctions between accounts. So I have these two accounts, but I had, tons of friends on my own personal page. And Christopher was one of those friends. And he'd sent me a little short film. Like these were like 2-minute films he did about his goldfish.
Yeah, Goldie the goldfish.
Goldie the goldfish. Yeah. So here's a single guy making films about his goldfish. So I knew he was unattached and had plenty of time on his hands. So, and he was probably a pretty desperate person. So I figured I had a good chance with getting him involved. Excuse me. But I went ahead and I just, sent him a Facebook email. What's your background in film? And he happened to mention they were doing the 168 Film Festival the next week, and says, "You want to be involved and work with us?" And I'm like, "Yeah, sure. Let me try that." Because it's just down in LA. I'm only an hour outside. So I did the 168 film. That was the first project we did together, called Skip Listening, which was nominated for all kinds of awards that year for the contest. And we're actually I actually ended up writing a full-length feature for that short, and we're trying to get that produced now too. So because I ended up writing that short with the same beats as you would a feature film, and that was our first project. And then we did, we probably done half a dozen or a dozen short films together over the years.
Well, Christopher wanted me to ask you because were you embarrassed by the way Christopher marketed the proof of concept trailer online?
Oh, yes, I was. Because Christopher, so when we made the proof, he is on social media doing things on social media that made me actually say to him, pull back just a little bit. Just like, I would just even say, it's like, just stop asking people to share. They understand if they want to share it, they understand they can share. But yeah, we went back and forth on a lot of things, but I was like, but thanks to his tenacious bulldog oversharing, that's how Stephen Baldwin ended up seeing that proof of concept trailer and then called us. And then we had about a 40-minute phone conversation with him. And then we ended up meeting with him live for a couple hours in Los Angeles. And then, that's really what got the whole thing. I really attribute, it was Christopher's oversharing on social media. And then Steven said, "I want to get this thing produced." And it took them, I think, it took them a few years, but they never gave up and they found the funding.
Are you shocked that Mike Lindell funded the film?
Yeah, Christopher, Steven was friends with Mike Lindell, and Mike was looking, because Mike had written an autobiography that he wanted to make into a movie. So he wanted to learn about the movie making process. And so he started getting, that's how he's wanted to start getting involved in Christian film. And, excuse me. Yeah. And so so at one point, Mike said to Stephen, why don't you let me produce this film? It's like, okay. So Mike Lindell bankrolled the entire production.
All right. Can you see God's hand on every step of bringing this film to pass?
Yes, because I specifically remember being in my kitchen. So long story, try to make short, is I started stand-up comedy in 1987. Excuse me, I had bronchitis this past month.
All good.
Just this last week, feeling 100% again. But this nagging cough, the remnants of the cough stay with me a little bit once I talk for a while.
I understand.
All right, so I'll begin again. So I began stand-up in 1987, and then did stand-up for over 20. I still do events. I just don't do it full-time anymore. But I transitioned about 8 years ago from stand-up to preaching, basically. So I basically went into ministry. and I preach every Sunday. And I still, like I said, I'm limited on travel now, so I don't do as many events as I used to do. But I still do stand up. But my focus now is on writing screenplays, and I've got a novel coming out this year. So really focusing on fictional characters that have a Christian worldview. So long story short, I remember, I wasn't doing stand up full time anymore. I didn't have this career that I was trying to, you know, um, nurture, so to speak. I was basically a preacher on Sundays now. But I remember standing in the kitchen in our home and praying and just saying, Lord, I don't want this film to get made unless it glorifies you. And there's not a lot of times in your life when you actually know your heart. I mean, a lot of times, we have mixed motives a lot of times, but I really feel that I was completely sincere when I said that, because I didn't have a career I was trying to nurture. It's just, a lot of times you're making this, is this good for my career? Is it not good for my, et cetera, et cetera. And my whole thing was, I'm truly more concerned about how it's going to reflect upon you in the end. And so that was my sincere prayer. And I feel like, and I feel like so when it got made, I felt like, okay, I rested in faith that the final product, because boy, that's a whole nother story in itself, getting that final product made, because filmmaking is a community endeavor, and you have a bunch of creatives and everyone thinks their ideas are the best, and they can bring bring some tension to the meeting room. But
Well,
by God's grace, we ended up with the product we ended up with the final version we ended up with.
well, the final version is fantastic, and I will tell you this, Thor. At the very, and I'm not going to give it away. When the very end of the movie happens, my very first thought was, I'm waiting for the sequel.
Wow. Okay.
Because it ends so perfectly that I'm like, okay, there's a sequel to this, because there's so much that can be built off, because the thing is about when you have an original movie, it's usually character building through the first movie. It's kind of like watching a whole John Wick series. The character was built in the first movie, and then the storyline just keeps going for the sequels. Right. So that's done, but at the same time, I can see a sequel to Church People with new characters coming in, mixing with some of the current characters in the original. Yeah, I can, and like I said, I can even see you and Steven doing a complete spinoff off of Church People, because there's just so much there to work with and so much to create.
During production, one of the producers said to me, it's like, think of an idea for a sequel. So I mapped out an idea for a sequel already, but I don't know right now. I don't know what it took so long to get the first one made. But who knows? You never know what God's going to do.
Well, I can tell you this, and I said this within the interview I did with Christopher Sean Shaw, and ladies and gentlemen, right now, the Church People DVD is available. If you can type it in online, or you can go to churchpeoplefilm.com. But here's the thing. You buy the DVD for a reason, because when you buy the DVD, that money is created and catches the attention of other people in the film industry, which can come very soon to help, who knows, create a sequel to Church People. Maybe Church People 2, who knows? Maybe it's Church People 2, The Resurrection. But ladies and gentlemen, this is how we get faith-based films made. The more you invest by buying the DVDs, buying the downloads, this catches other people's attention. When they see success on a film like this one, and this film, ladies and gentlemen, deserves the success. A lot of hard work was put into this. And not only that, it's a stellar film, and it's a comedy. It's a faith-based comedy. We can laugh at ourselves as church people, as the body of Christ. We get it, okay? We got to laugh at ourselves. But at the same time, The message of the gospel has come through this film in one of the most amazing, anointed, astonishing ways. And I can guarantee you this, when you watch Church People with your family, you're going to fall in love with not only all the characters, you're just going to fall in love with the film. And I guarantee you're going to have the same feeling I did at the end. I want to see the next installment. So how does that happen? It's called buying the DVD, and when it hits streaming, buy it. Don't just rent it.
It is
buy
streaming.
it.
It's streamed first. It actually is streaming now. So people, if you search for Church People on Amazon or Apple TV or whatever you have, iTunes, you can find it. It'll come up and you can download it digitally.
Fantastic. And, I'm going to step off my soapbox here for a moment, Thor. So what is your ultimate goal for Church People?
Well, our ultimate goal was to get it made. So the ultimate goal happened. And now it's just to get it seen. So that's the biggest thing is we'd like people to see it and then tell others. It's kind of like right now our best option is just word of mouth. It's like, if you love it, just like it's so nice of you to give it such glowing reviews. I really appreciate that. And if people sincerely like it, then tell others about it. And again, then we'll become the cult classic in a good way, of course.
Oh, absolutely. I believe that's going to happen. And so what is next for Thor Ramsey?
Well, right now, believe it or not, I'm working on a screenplay. So I've been writing screenplays with a bunch of people. Wes Halula and I have known each other for years, and we ended up spending a month together doing the final draft of Church People, and it was a great experience. Wes is a great guy, and so I really liked that collaborative experience. And so I ended up collaborating this last year with 4 or 5 people now I'm collaborating with, finished. So what I ended up doing was collaborating with multiple people during the week and have 3 different Zoom meetings, and we'd, from zero to finished script. And so we finished already about 4 or 5 scripts this year. So Brad Stein, who's a great comedian, and I wrote a script together called The Revenge of Adam and Eve. And Brad had a contact that had an idea for a film that he wanted to produce. So I had a Zoom meeting with him. He told us the concept. And so right now I'm being hired to write a screenplay called The Puppets of Pigeon Forge. And so right now it looks like it's, at least I'm going to get paid to write the screenplay. And it looks like he wants to get this thing made. And so it sounds like we're going to shoot this thing in late summer, early fall. So that'll be the next project that comes out. And then I have a novel that's at the publisher right now that I don't have a release date yet, but I'll have a novel called The End Times Comedy Show that's coming out sometime this year. And so those are the 2 main things right now, in addition to the other screenplays that I've sent out to people. And, we've got other, like I said, there's a full-length version of Skip Listening. There's The Revenge of Adam and Eve. Bob Smiley and I wrote a script together called A Hard Left. That's a comedy about marriage. So yeah, just got a time travel comedy from a Christian worldview that we're doing a final rewrite on. So there's just a bunch of stuff in the works. It's like stand-up. You work on 10 jokes and you see which one hits. And so we're just waiting to see what happens.
Oh, exactly. Even the Bible tells us when you wake up in the morning, you go out, you do this, you do that, because you never know which one's going to hit. So, basically just keep your nose to the grindstone and keep pounding pavement, because it will definitely come back. And Thor, I have enjoyed our conversation so much. And ladies and gentlemen, go to churchpeoplefilm.com, sign up for the updates, and I am going to encourage you to buy the DVD. We need more faith-based films out there for, not just the body of Christ, but the whole point of getting the message of the gospel out to the rest of the world. And let me tell you something. We all deserve to laugh, and Thor Ramsey has really brought the funny in this movie, and you're going to love it. So take it from me. Go to churchpeoplefilm.com. The DVD is out right now. Buy the film. And here's what we're going to do. Just to give you a little teaser on how great this film is, we're going to take us a short break, and I'm going to show you the movie trailer to Church People. We'll be right back after these messages.
I told you if we broke attendance records, I'd get the church logo tattooed on my arm.
Skip, remember back when we first started? All we did was preach the gospel.
Ooh, Superman works. I like Superman. Guy, what do you think?
What happened to you?
Me? Your dad is the one with the gimmicks.
The power of the Holy Spirit propels us.
I just want the church to get back to the gospel.
Problem is you're trying to get your message across.
The gospel?
Right. And ain't nobody listening to that.
For Good Friday and Easter, I need something big. Amen?
Bigger than the resurrection.
Bigger than anything we've ever done. National headlines.
Preach on the death and resurrection of Jesus.
Bam! An actual crucifixion.
Uh-oh.
By placing the nails through your palms in the right place, we hope to avoid major nerve damage.
Operation Stop Skip is a go. That's awesome.
You have to cancel this Good Friday stunt.
Don't be so dramatic, honey. Ooh, I like the rusty ones.
What are you gonna do?
I told him he's insane.
Been praying for you about that toe fungus.
This could be beneficial for all parties involved.
We foster a yes environment here.
God wanted me to marry you and you could be my wife.
I have an answer for you.